What's going on, Oasis?
Hope y'all doing well at the start of winter.
No lie, man. No lie. So we had this, for those of you guys who don't know, if you weren't at church or didn't know all the stuff that happened, so we had D Now this weekend, Disciple Now.
Yeah.
We took a bunch of students. We got to be with 230. So we were 40 something.
house.
Yeah, it was a packed house. It was cool. It looked good too. Really cool vibe, and we got to do it down at High Plains Retreat Center. But how that leads into the weather that we have outside, it doesn't lead into it, but it's the coldest weather since February. So let's have a youth event. You know, that's real life. That's real ministry. That's real student ministry.
Yes.
And yeah, but it was a great weekend, man. A lot of people, made some decisions, and I think it was just, Disciple Now. What it's supposed to be is just getting your group together and have some community.
It's a good start.
It is. It is.
That's what it's supposed to be.
And that's what, in student ministry, you typically have 3 to 5 events, we'll say that are just, man, they're just your staples of your youth ministry. And it's going to be camp in the summer. It's going to be some type of D Now or retreat, or maybe both, in the fall or spring. And then somewhere in there, you probably have a mission trip, right? And every one of those have a different identity, and they all do different things. And the stories are different, Adam. There's just different stories all the way around. So, we coming back from this one, and then it'll take about 2 weeks before the students start talking about it, because everything's a blur.
Yeah.
There's so much movement and so many stories and so many, I can't believe you ate that, and, all of those things. So, again, like I said from the stage yesterday, I'm just grateful for church and they pay for a lot of that. They front the cost. There's always a cost that is incurred by a youth trip or college trip or whatever. And the church eats that. But that's also what that's what we tithe, and that's what the Lord does. He uses us as a congregation to impact generations and impact the world around us. So, man, that's pretty amazing. So thank you, church, for being obedient and listening to the Lord. And then, of course, yesterday, Pastor Bradley is alluding to something in there. Dale, by God, Brisby was in here, old son.
I feel more country just being in the dust presence.
In the present. I have to say, and it is a bit of a confession, that I do follow Dale Brisby on social media, but I have to say I follow him because it's funny content, but it's I'm familiar with. I knew he was been here, but that is not my flavor, and I don't care. But my gosh, man. Dude gets up there and lays down some solid stuff.
Yeah.
That is some God-fearing, and I love that. And use of Scripture and just knowing their stuff. And in fact, I was talking with somebody last night that just know. You can tell by how somebody talks, like
What their foundation.
Yeah, that's the
really
truth.
is.
It's not just knowledge, but it's not just knowing God. It's or knowing of God. It's knowing God, and you could hear it in how really just the topic was handled. And so I appreciated that. Just listening and thinking, man, that's lifestyle evangelism right there.
It is.
And that counts.
A lot of our generation, our younger ones that we lead, man, they are in tune.
Yeah, they are.
So I told them, I was like, oh yeah, that was Dale. Like this was like a couple months ago when he came here. Like they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you didn't. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to put that envy in you.
So it's just cool, though. I love that, and I love that you brought up just generational. I think that the good old days of, we just want some authentic faith, and that's what the world needs right now. It's just somebody who's going to tell them truth and then clearly back it up.
Yeah.
Man, that makes a difference. So I was appreciative of that, just seeing it. So today, actually, it sounds like one of our mics is messed up. Maybe yours is.
Yours looks a little low.
Okay. So we're adjusting something. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is the little things, in life. But I think you're going to expand even more on that. But it's some of the little things that are in our life that are passed down. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and really there's two times during the year that I think that I don't know, traditions come into play. And they're kind of welcomed inside of it. And I think it's going to be Thanksgiving. It's going to be Christmas.
Yeah.
Like most real family traditions probably revolve around that. Probably birthdays as well. But really these that are really, you think of family. And so what I'm going to talk about is I'm just going to kind of play on that a little bit. And it's going to be out of Joshua chapter 4. And it's the 12 memorial stones from the Jordan. I'm going to explain. We're going to read a lot of scripture here for a second. It's going to be verses 1 through 7 and then 20 through 24, and then kind of talk about that today. So Joshua 4:1, it says, "When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, 'Take 12 men from the people from which a tribe of men, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out into the midst of the Jordan, from every place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over to you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight.' Then Joshua called the 12 men, and from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, and the men from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, 'Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulders, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, What do these stones mean to you? They shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over the Jordan, and the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And so those stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever.'" So before we read verses 20 through 24, to just about anybody, those are just going to be a pile of rubble. It's just some rocks.
Yep.
And that's what it would have been. That's what it would have looked like. I can't tell you what the structure looked like, or if it was just a pile of rocks, or maybe it looks like one of those cool towers or whatever. I kind of get the impression that it was a pile of rocks. But I think what's interesting about these is the rocks that were going to be taken there. They're probably going to look different based on where they were. So like where they were standing, whether they were in the water, whether they were water washed, whether they had been just on the shore, whatever. And I think what's incredible about that is there would be something remarkable to somebody who would just notice, like, that pile of rocks didn't just happen. It's not a rock slide. Those were put there. And so I think leading into verse 20, you have, "And those 12 stones, which they took out in the Jordan, Joshua set up from Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, When your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do those stones mean?" Because it's a unique feature, right? So it's different. "Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did in the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever." I love this in a couple different regards, but one, God did this amazing feat, this miracle, and he showed up to his people in this incredible way. And then he tells, like, this is going to be a stone. This is going to be a moment that needs to be remembered for generations, right? And then going on, specifically, when your children ask their fathers. I love the familial side of that with it's a great time to use this word. What is the legacy that is passed on? What is the significance of this? As we are about to decorate, whether it's a nativity scene that is out, or maybe it's just something that a grandmother made and it only gets put out at Christmas time or during the holidays. It's this amazing moment where our kids come in and they see, like, what does this mean? Where did this come from? Yeah, this is that time that your grandmother did, or this is this time that your grandmother did. And it's these faith-based moments that we get a chance to pass on to our kids and the grandkids and everything that happens from that point on. So it's, what is the point of the tradition? And I guess my submission to this would be, the tradition that we have, it seems like there are these moments that are handmade. It's not that just happen naturally in year to year, where we get a chance to just point to God. Easter is one of them. But then also there's this bad rap of Christmas happening for Thanksgiving and all the stuff that goes along with it. It makes for great jokes. Don't get me wrong, it does. But it's also this amazing time where we get to point back to the Savior. We get to point back to God and be like, man, we have this amazing gift that is our family in this time of year, to set these stones, these events that just point back to God and point back to how amazing the family is and honoring God. And you talk about a generational thing that we get to leave behind, these traditions. Because, look, Christmas and Thanksgiving are going to be with us. So redeeming them, using that to just spring forward for what God is doing. And talk about things to be thankful for, our own traditions, our own pile of rocks, so to speak, that we set up that people will ask, what is this about? It's about God. That's what it's about.
And I think looking at this whole area, focusing on little things, I got two stories for us, and they're both found in the Gospel of Mark. In Mark chapter 6, this kind of set the stage a little bit. Jesus, he sent the disciples out. He said, send them out 2 by 2s, and said they were so busy that none of them had time to eat or sit. And so they went to a desolate place to rest. And then inside of that, the process of them getting there, all of a sudden 5,000 people followed them there. And so that is not a restful situation. But so coming into this, one of the elements, big element, a meal happens. Jesus feeds the 5,000. But one thing I want to highlight real quick is a lot of times when we read this passage, and we read it so quickly, we let it seem like Jesus gives an opportunity and instruction in the same breath, and he didn't. He said, "You feed them." He looked at the disciples and said, "You feed them." I kind of wonder what happened in that moment. Because looking in today's society, man, I read the next verse with sarcasm. Are we supposed to go spend $500 or 500 denarii to get a loaf of bread? And in that realm, it's like, okay, were they being sarcastic? I don't know, but I fully feel like most of humanity today would maybe respond in that manner, because we're looking at our own strength, we're looking at our own power, we're looking at our own resources. And so inside this regard of them missing it, there is another passage that if you finish up to the last verse of this chapter, right before it, in verse 51, it says, "And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astonished, for they did not understand about the loaves of bread, but their hearts were hardened." And so in this moment of they did not understand and their hearts were hardened, I gotta use a little bit of creativity of they weren't grateful for the one simple meal. And don't get me wrong, it is a magnificent power for God to feed 5,000 people through Jesus and what they had on hand. But they weren't even grateful themselves to receiving it. Therefore, they didn't acknowledge the whole entire magnitude and the weight of 5,000 people being fed. So that's how I get to, okay, why were their hearts hardened? Because every time we see stuff like that, it's like, and God hardened the heart of Saul, and God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and who can resist God? A lot of times is the argument of that. But this, I believe the disciples fell into it themselves. It wasn't just Jesus hardened their heart in that minute so that he could teach them something else. No, I think, and he sent them out. He sent them out to heal and to spread the good news. And so, I think that was a little bit of their own setback. And they missed because the little thing that they missed is they weren't focused on what happened to those around them, the one meal that they were also given. So this one little element, they missed it. The next chapter 7, this kind of painting this picture again. This is the Pharisees start to follow Jesus. They're entering into a little bit more of a animosity in between the two of Jesus and the religious leaders. And this is where they ask them, like, hey, your disciples eat without washing their hands, which was more of a ceremonial, not a COVID or health issue. It was just a ceremonial of, we need to be right with God because we came in contact with Gentiles.
Yeah,
That's the whole backing behind that passage. Whereas we were really like, oh yeah, it's normal to wash your hands. Yes, it is good to wash your hands, but they didn't have soap back then. It's like more is like, no, we're just gonna wash that off. Rubbing it just as good, right? But it was ceremonial for them to be cleansed, and it was, a lot of commentators said it was their act of worship towards God. And I'm like, oh wow, that's their act of worship towards God of, I touched you and you're gross.
Yeah.
And so here's another element of a little thing. Although the religious leaders were focused on a little thing of like, okay, the disciples aren't washing their hands. But also this one little thing, it totally went against showing love to people. It totally went against of identifying of the way, the little things that God gives to us, that he allows to us, that he provides for us to go, okay, this one little thing, I'm going to pay attention to it so that I can show it and identify it in someone else's life. And so when it comes to this regard of us focusing on the little things, we need to focus on the little things that allow us to show people love, and allow us to show that love has been given, and not just when it comes from us, but for sure when it comes to us. And I think that's one thing that the religious leaders, they definitely missed out on. There was love that they should have had of, man, God chose us. He chose us to be his example and his expression of love to the world. They got caught up in themselves, and so therefore, man, but how do we hold on to this?
Yeah.
How do we build our kingdom? It's like, yeah, let's take those 12 rocks, but let's build something more else around it. And now it's a distraction.
Now it's a distraction. I think that's a good call. I really appreciated you saying that with the tradition. And there's nothing inherently wrong with the tradition. The problem with it is just when you begin to worship it. And what was that tradition based on?
Yeah. And that was Jesus' response to them. You've given traditions and you think it's worship.
Yeah.
And his example of breaking that down was, now you give other people, you give sons and daughters excuses not to give to their parents, and because they give it to the temple.
Right. Right.
So I was like, oh, and Jesus, he went a little further of like, no, show people love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. Man, I love the intention that just kind of goes along with that.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's just a great place to end it is, as we go into holiday season, declaring our intentions, are they, what are our intentions? Are they selfish in nature, which is quite plausible? Or are they rooted in God? Are they rooted in other people? Are they rooted in our family? We're just trying to create this community and just love, love for each other and love for the Lord. So, maybe check our intentions as we go into it. And we've all said this, man, thankful, joyful. That's where the sermon series, and that's a choice. And so, placing that up of, we're going to choose the Lord, and we're going to choose the family, and just being around each other, and not get bogged down on the little stuff.
Yeah.
Because the little stuff can become big stuff when we just.
Yeah, there is a fine line between little of show you love and little of make sure this looks the best.
Yeah. So
I know.
Well, we hope that you guys have a great day, and we appreciate everybody who shows up and interacts with us and everything that goes along with it. We certainly hope that this holiday season it is a blessing to you and everything that goes along with it. Love you guys. We'll catch you later.
See you.